drinking eyes never open. Try and say somebody will die, and I hate hoping. Wishing that the pills let you cry, and I hate hoping. Someday I will go back outside and see her okay.
Hello again to you, Carson.
Hello.
And thanks for joining me in this chat. I specifically called it a chat to you as well because it's not really an interview because I don't have questions prepared or anything to shoot at you.
Cool.
It's not really a podcast either per se because I don't know if it will be 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever it will be. So we're just having a chat and then we'll see where we end up going.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we'll just freeball it. We'll figure something out.
Exactly. I'm sure we can work on the routine and
yeah, we're pros after all.
We're pros. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. So we just met actually at Raraland not too long ago. The first offline event I was attending. You have been to some in the scene, right? There's some DreamHack stuff.
Yeah, that was my third. So I went as a casual observer to DreamHack Anaheim, and that's where I met people for the first time. That's where I met Neo and Remo for the first time, and Todd for the first time, although briefly, and all the players. And then I went to Sweden as a caster, and then Roberland as a caster. So I've been to 3 events.
Okay. And have you been... I don't really know much about your history prior to when I entered the scene myself in 2017, I think, where I saw some of your YouTube videos. I remember one where you had like a review of creeping mechanics and where you went over like lightning shield and ensnare and poison and so on. Have you been in the Warcraft scene a long time prior to that, or is it relatively new?
I've been playing since about, I think 2010. I found like a bunch of like YouTube videos, like Chumpesque and like a Stonebreak Kid, like those sort of old school YouTube casters, like sort of the post era, like after WCR, like okay, 3, 2, 1, and go with like the sync casting. There was sort of the next era, which was the YouTube casters of like Stormy Z as well as in there. Crota is in there. Is obviously a legend. Crota is one of the biggest casters on YouTube, and I found all those guys. And I was like, oh, this is a cool game. Like my brother had the discs, the box set when we were younger. So I always saw it like in the cupboard, like, oh, that's a cool game. Maybe I'll play that one day. So I knew it existed, Warcraft 3, but I had never actually played it. So 2010, it was like, you know, like look up, oh, the best Warcraft 3 player, Warcraft 3 Super Pros, whatever it was. Because I had a little bit of understanding of like esports and stuff at the time. And then I found like a Grubby vs. Moon game. I was like, okay, this is cool. I'll install the game and play. So it was like 2010 very casually. I didn't even know that like ladder games existed. And then
so just as everyone before StarCraft, you entered the scene. Essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was kind of a bummer because I did want to play StarCraft 2, but my computer couldn't run it because I was still on my family computer at the time. So I was like, all right, when StarCraft 2 beta came out, I was like, I'll just won't even try it, whatever. Which maybe it would have been a completely different situation we end up in if I did end up playing StarCraft 2.
Yeah, well, we're happy you had your family PC at the time then to bring us to the Warcraft scene.
Yeah. And it's just very casual. 2012 was sort of a big point because that's when I met Bidu, Ricky. And that's when I joined Dust Gaming and sort of started to meet all like these really good players, at least in America, which there wasn't a ton of. And then I sort of took it a little bit more serious until then. But I didn't really, you mentioned like the videos. I never really did much other than those videos. Like I just sort of played and I knew a lot of people in the scene. I was very involved in like playing and practicing and all that stuff, but I never played in any leagues. I never did any YouTube videos, any casting until about like I did those YouTube videos in 2016, 2017. And then we started doing Warcraft 3 leagues in 2018. And then we started casting in 2019. And then from there, here we are. So yeah, really when you joined the scene, it was pretty much when I started doing content, so to speak.
Okay. That's quite interesting. I've just assumed it had been going on for a while with like the casting essentially. I knew you hadn't done a lot of content, I guess, because could see your YouTube channel. But it feels very natural to hear you both with the casting and the tutorials. So it's not something you have tried in any other games prior to Warcraft either.
No, I always wanted to because I played a lot of games growing up. Obviously, Warcraft 2010, but I was born in '96, so I played games when I was sort of younger. And I played a lot of Counter-Strike, which obviously is known for having the best sort of esports talent ever. Like they have consistently had the best casters and the best hosts and all that. So I always wanted to, like, when I was playing Counter-Strike, I always thought it'd be cool to be a commentator. And like when I was a kid, I was like 10, 11 years old playing Counter-Strike. I used to play against bots and like pretend to cast over top of my game. So it was always something I was aware of and interested in, but I never tried it. And every player sort of has this ego where they're like, I could cast better than that caster. This is a very, very common thing, which is maybe even true for a lot of the players, because I do find after casting with a lot of these, Qbert and Don Delare and Hitman, they all cast it. Like all these people that know the game pretty well, they tend to do an excellent job casting. So I had a little bit of that ego as well when I was a player. Like, yeah, I could cast better than these guys. Just get me a shot. But I never tried it or put any effort in. So
it's easy to fall flat as well when you do these things. I do this myself, especially with like playing, seeing someone play it like semi-pro level. I'm like, that doesn't look that difficult. I could probably keep up with those, and then I go into the ladder, and then I get demolished by some 1500 player.
Right.
That's how it goes for me, at least. But but yeah, speaking of Rivalland, let's return back to that. An offline event. That's the second offline event you're casting.
Yeah.
And how is that the dynamic when you're casting offline compared to when you're sitting in your comfy home and doing online casting?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm lucky to be surrounded by extremely professional, experienced people like Rima Neo, Todd, obviously, Rotterdam at Sweden. We had Dennis doing the hosting here, who is he's very involved in the scene, but he I don't know how much he's done for hosting other than maybe in Smash Bros, but he was obviously a very, very just cool guy, which is what you want for a host. So I was lucky to be surrounded by people, and have been, that really know what they're doing and can sort of carry me. I think especially sort of Todd has taken that role and sort of like helping me and giving me a lot of pointers and stuff when it comes to offline events, because it's a very different dynamic. Like online, like I'm in pajama pants right now, I would cast like this as well. You don't have a camera on you the whole time when you're casting at home. You're running the OBS yourself. Like, back to Warcraft, obviously when we do our production stuff, which we do have, decent production, we got an overlay, we got a timer and all that stuff, but we still have to run it all ourselves. Whereas when you're doing an offline event, that's all in someone else's hands. So all you have to think about, you don't even have to watch, you don't have to move the mouse in game. In Sweden, we did have a computer in front of us in case we wanted to check something. But in Raraland, you literally just get a feed of the game and you just cast over top of it. So you could have no arms and no legs, and you could still do the job essentially. Whereas at home, you're doing a lot more things, so you're a lot more distracted, and it's a lot more casual because of the distraction. So there's almost more pressure, even though there's less to do, for the quality of your cast at an offline event, because it's like, okay, this is all I'm here to do. I have to talk, I have to hype this up, I have to make a storyline. So the pressure's on to really speak well and say the right things and do the right thing, because there's no other distractions. You just have to just do this one thing, speak into the microphone very, very well. Whereas at home, people sort of have an understanding of like, all right, I got to edit this scene on OBS. All right, I got to ban this guy in the chat. I got to find a game on my Discord on my other monitor. So it's sort of like it's almost forced into being more casual and lower pressure from a commentary point of view.
Yeah, and I suppose you're oftentimes doing your own casting, like solo casting, when you're doing it from home.
Yes,
especially with the time zones, so you kind of divide it amongst yourself, I imagine, depending on who can take a shift.
Yeah,
that means you both have to do the analytical part and the hype, as you mentioned yourself. How much do you think when you are dual casting? How much do you think about who has the role of being the hype man and who has the role of do some thinking and make some interesting points along the game?
Right. Yeah. So the two terms we tend to use for that is would be a color commentator, would tend to be my role. So a color commentator, how I've described it, is adds color to the game. So the play-by-play guy, which is the other role, It's just saying this is happening when this is happening. The puck is being passed to number 98, and 98 shoots and he misses, sort of thing. That's play by play. Whereas the analytical guy, the color commentator, will be like, oh, if you see, they're in this triangle formation, so they're able to pass between, and then the defenders are in the center and they can't find someone. That's the color guy, and it tends to be we tend to sort of know because we've casted so much together between Remo, Neo, me, and Todd. We've done it so much together that we sort of know. When I cast with Neo, I do the color and he does the play-by-play. When I cast with Remo, we tend to do a little bit of mixture of both because we both tend to be people that really want to just talk about the game from an analytical side a lot. When I do it with Todd, it tends to depend on the matchup. Me and Todd tend to cast together when there's an orc or a human playing, and then if there's an orc playing, he'll ask me questions about the analytical side, and he'll do play-by-play. If there's a human playing, I'll do more of the play-by-play, and I'll ask him questions about the game. So it's really nice that we don't have any Night Elf casters, but for the other 3 races, we could sort of force it depending on what the matchup is. But most of the time, when it's like, say, me and Neo, or when me and Bidu were casting together a lot, then they would do play-by-play and I would do the color commentary. When me and Soul Glider casted together and me and OC Drummer casted together, OC Drummer is a play-by-play guy, and then Soul Glider I would consider more of a color commentary guy. So I would try to fill the other role when necessary. But it's just we're pretty familiar with each other, so we know when to go back and forth with it.
Okay. Would you say you have a preference between the two, or is it whatever?
Yeah, color comment. I'm definitely a color commentator by trade, I would say. That's sort of how people notice me. That's how Neo noticed me. He's like, oh, you're pretty good at analyzing stuff, and that's sort of what I'm known for. I do think I'm better at that, and I prefer that. But I do, is an interesting thing, because I remember talking to Todd, and this just goes back to the whole Todd being the one that's really helped me and given me a lot of pointers in the scene. It was something that actually really, really stuck with me. I don't know if he meant it to stick with me when he said it. I forget what it was. It was maybe in Sweden, I think, is when he said it. Maybe it was a different time, but I think it was in Sweden. And I was talking to him about, like, man, sometimes we're in a game and I only have like 30 seconds to analyze this thing, but I feel like I could talk for like 20 minutes on it. Like, I really wish I could just pause in game and, analyze this forever and ever and ever and really go deep. And then his response, I don't exactly remember what he said, but he pretty much said, like, well, yeah, we could all do that. We could all do, that's the reason we're hired to do this job. That's the reason why we're here doing this, because we could all analyze the game infinitely. It's sort of about being able to fit the stuff into that 30-second segment and not go overboard, because we could all do that at the end of the day. It's like that's why we're here. So it really made me think, like, yeah, you don't need to be overly analytical all the time. It's like you need to be able to do color commentary in a way that's like makes sense to people that are casual observers, is easily digestible, and isn't going way overboard. You need like a 15-second, like, that's why he did that. This is why it's interesting. This is why you should think about this. Onto the play-by-play again. So when Todd told me that, it really, that was almost like the most useful thing I've ever heard, because before then it was just like, I was the guy that would dissect 30 seconds of gameplay for 20 minutes. I was that guy, but that's not always needed in a tournament setting.
So yeah, that's one of the things that I feel are hard to do, I assume, without having cast. That is knowing when to cut in as well and say, now I will interrupt the play-by-play and then come with my golden nuggets of the game.
Yeah, it's where being offline really helps a lot, because you can literally like queue. Like I'll be casting with Neo, and then like he'll go like 3, 2, 1 and point at me in like a fight, and we'll go off. Whereas online, like even right now in this Discord call, we have a little bit of delay. It's hard. Sometimes we like talk over each other a little bit, and that's just the limitations of it. Even if we're on camera and can see each other, it's still very easy to do that. So offline is really nice for that, and it's also just something that you have to be very aware. I was talking to someone at Rowerland about this, because they were talking to me about casting. I was like, hey, you just have to be very aware of how you end your sentences. You can't end very ambiguous, or like not actually have like a period at the end of your sentence. You have to be like, okay, the Blade Master is gonna go attack, and he's gonna go buy something from the shop, and then we're gonna see if Moon is able to end this game. And then it's like, okay, I know that I'm able to talk now. Whereas if you sort of trail off and then you talk again, so you have to be very assertive with how you end it, which is something that's really, really difficult. And that's something that I feel I don't know. I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because I know when I'm listening to people doing commentary, I'm very sensitive to like, oh, he almost cut him off. Like, oh, that hurts. That's really awkward. Oh, he keeps cutting him off. Ooh, this is like not. I'm very sensitive to that sort of thing. So I'm very aware of like, okay, let's not have that happen when I do commentary. I don't know. Are you super aware of that too? When there's sort of that awkward exchange a bit.
I don't think I'm that aware, because that was my next question actually. That my question would be if you ever feel like you have something you want to say, but you are just waiting for that pause from the other guy to chime in, and waiting.
Yeah.
Because I don't, when I watch Back to Warcraft cast, I don't really ever feel like you're cutting each other off, or like the one person is like starting a sentence and then stopping again because the other one is still talking.
Well, it's sort of I guess that's credit to the play-by-play people, because it seems like people might think play-by-play is easier or something like that, just because you don't have to necessarily understand everything perfectly in the game. But really, the job of a play-by-play guy is to be able to hype when you need hype, and be able to force create the storyline and hype up the extreme moments, but then to also know when something has to be analyzed, and to give them sort of the space to do that, and to ask the right questions to the color commentator. Oh, why necessarily did that happen? That was a very important part in the game. What should they do next? So to sort of know when you're able to give space to the other person. Wait, did I answer your question? Sorry, what was your question again? Did that answer that?
Yeah, I don't feel it really hard a question, because you answered it before I asked the question with if you feel like you are interrupting people, or like wanting to chime in. But I feel like you already kind of said that before.
Oh, yeah. It was like if you ever like you want to like just jump in over top of someone. I think that's sort of back to Todd's point a little bit. Like anyone can analyze any section of the game for 20 minutes straight. So it's up to you. Now going back to the color commentator side of things, it's up to me as a color commentator to be like, all right, we're past that moment when I need to analyze that. We don't need to go 5 minutes in the past and retroactively analyze the game. I have to accept, even though it hurts, even though that was a really cool thing that I want to talk about as a color commentator, that moment has passed. There was something more important. There's something else in the storyline that needs to be covered. And then it's then I can go do theorycraft and pause and talk about that later on. But in this game, in this moment, I have to accept that I'm not able to do that analysis that I want to. I have to throw that in the garbage sometimes.
Okay. And rounding off with Shadowlands before we go touch on something else. What were your? Do you have something that stands out for them in an event like that? Is that mostly a specific series, or a player interaction, or talking to a specific guy from the community? What would you say is? What do you remember about an event like this?
Yeah, Rubberland was interesting because I actually really didn't want to go because I really hate traveling. Like I really dislike traveling a lot. To the point where like even though I can go for free, and it's it's great, it's a good experience, and it's fun. I almost didn't want to go. So going, I was like super dreading it, and the travel was really long, and I was super tired. But then when I got there and I started meeting everyone, I'm consistently surprised, and this is something that has always stood out to me at Warcraft 3 events. I'm consistently surprised by how friendly and social everyone in the Warcraft scene is. I guess it's because everyone's older. Like, when I went to my first event, I was like 22, 23. So like I was used to people, like awkward kids pretty much. That's what I'm used to being around. And I myself am an awkward kid that's not very good at those situations and meeting new people and all that. But, I'm consistently surprised how everyone in the Warcraft 3 scene is able to be super friendly and helpful and carry conversations. Because even though I said this on stream the other day, even though I'm good at talking into a microphone about a video game, I'm not necessarily good when we're sitting around a table at a bar and I have to carry a conversation and be the life of the party. Whereas I find everyone else in the Warcraft scene is like that. Like there was at no point did I feel uncomfortable or like I couldn't just hang out with some people. So I think that's the main thing that always stands out at Rubberland, especially because there's so many fans there. I mean, friends, honestly, at this point, the Warcraft, it's such a small community. But has always stood out is like, wow, these people are actually all cool. Because you think of a video game event. When I tell my friends I'm going to go talk about video games in Germany, like, oh, there must be a lot of weird nerds there. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we're weird nerds, but they're actually, I'm the weirdest nerd there. All these people are very normal and married and have houses and have kids, and they're like, they're just here hanging out doing a hobby. So that's what always stands out.
Yeah, I think a lot of has had that idea, that prejudice, I guess, about the stereotype of 100 plus people gathering, and I halfway expected that like
Yeah.
50% would be sitting in their room and the other 50% would be in each of their corners,
Yes.
maybe talking to one or two people, but it was like some of the people there are very social, and that's
Yes.
great for an event like that. That's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. So is that what stands out, like the community gathering? Because the other two events, that's been during the pandemic, hasn't it? So it's mostly been players there.
Yeah, because Anaheim was at sort of the very beginning. Like it was at the point where there was a travel ban in China.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chinese players couldn't actually go to Anaheim, but everywhere else was still open. Like even at Anaheim, I was sick. I'm pretty sure I even had COVID, and they were still able to travel because there was no testing yet. There was no bans on it or anything like that. It was so early. So it was very, very at the beginning of the pandemic, and then obviously Sweden was in the middle of it. So there was never that many people there. At Anaheim, especially because California, it's tough to travel for a lot of the Europeans. So I got to meet a lot of the American guys there, which same thing. Like all those people are so cool. It's unreal. So yeah, that was Rubber Land was unique in that, with a lot of people there.
That's also one of the problems with offline events in USA, because even though you are in US, when you have a West Coast event like Anaheim was, for an East Coaster, that's still a very far travel. But when you are in Europe and have like Hamburg, for example, then it's very easy for someone like me who's stationed in Denmark to go there, and as well, same for France and even Russia and England.
Right.
So it's
sort of nice. And you get so many different types of people in that case. Where even though like the difference between somebody from like Oregon in America and New York, which we that's like Hitman and then SNS, so there's a very big difference between even people from the same country in different states. In Europe you get that, especially just so many different types of people, which is cool. Even though there's a lot of just Germans at Rauberland, because there's a lot of Germans in the scene, but still that's a cool thing about Europe.
Generally in the scene, I would say there's just a huge amount of Germans.
I guess that's a credit to their personalities. I mean, obviously, Back to Warcraft is German. They've had so many people that have just been like pillars of the scene, like pro players as well, Yaws and all those guys.
Yeah, from the very beginning, it seems like, because yourself, Mastershaft, I don't know when it started, but because that's an old thing. It's not just the last couple of years it's been there. But I
think 2006 even. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's pretty old though.
And I don't think any other, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think any other single country has had so much, in-scene support, maybe looking aside from China and Korea. But like of the Western countries, I don't think any other country has had like a dedicated tournament for the country itself. I don't know if the US have had anything comparable to Meisterschaft, but
yeah, it's because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure ESL is a German company. I'm pretty sure they were founded in Germany. Now they're run by the Saudi government. Well, that's a conversation for another day. But I think they were founded in Germany. It might be wrong there.
Yeah, that would make sense, because Cologne is like the big ESL event, right? That's there.
Right. So. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's mix things up and go to another topic. Cool. You mentioned you started off primarily playing for the first 80 years. So let's talk a bit about Carson as a player.
All right, cool.
You play Orc.
Yes.
I think most people know that. How come you went to choose Orc?
Right. Well, it actually goes back to the YouTubing, Chumpesque and Stonebreak Kid and all those guys. The first game, let me see if I can find it. The first game I ever watched, I have this memory, was Grubby vs. Moon, 2007, Tearing a Stand. If I can't find it, I'll just screw it. But I wonder if it comes up when I Google it. It was a Chumpesque cast. It was a best of 3, Grubby vs. Moon, Tearing a Stand. And WEM finals, I'm pretty sure it was. It's been casted by a few different people. Maybe it was 2008, 2007, but that was the first game I watched. And it was Talons on TS, and the Demon Hunter and the Beastmaster went in for the tier 2 cancels, and Grubby like had the perfect Sim City to like surround the Demon Hunter, and then he like peon block to keep all his tier 2 alive. And I was like, that was so sick. So I played Orc because of that, but I actually initially for some reason I decided to play Night Elf. I think because I found a guide. I always wanted to play Orc, but I decided to play Night Elf because I found a guide on YouTube. Of somebody, and it was just like, here's Mass Huntress, or here's like, I think it was Demon Hunter Panda Mass Dryads, and that was the build that I played until I could beat the computer. So I started off as Night Elf initially, but I always liked Orc and wanted to play Orc because of the Grubby versus Moon thing. This was a YouTube channel. It was Preparing for StarCraft 2. It was literally the YouTube channel. It was like, a little bit after when I started playing. It was StarCraft 2 was announced, and this guy was playing Night Elf on ladder and doing commentary over it, just doing like talons and beating people, and doing like Mass Huntress and stuff. So I played Night Elf, and then I switched to Orc like a year in, probably, to playing against the computer and stuff like that.
So when you saw a game against Talons, you thought, I can't wait to play against Talons.
Yeah, Grubby made it look very elegant, but
fair.
I'm still getting destroyed by this. I still can't do what he did 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But and then I played a lot of the other races. I think that's sort of where a lot of my analysis. That's where it's my playing has helped a lot of my analysis, because I've played all the races at times. And there was another, I think 2015, I played Night Elf for about 6-8 months just for fun. I've played Undead for about a year and a half. I obviously played Human at Anaheim. I played it during that whole time for about a year. So I've sort of mained all the races at the point, but I've always gone back to Orc eventually, which I think is a common thing for people. My race sucks, I'm going to switch to this race that beats me. And then they realize it's not so easy after all, and then they switch back. I think it's pretty common.
That's how the circle goes, typically, yeah.
Yeah.
But what makes
Forever
you come back to Orc all the way? Is there something specific about the race, or is it just home sweet home type of thing?
Yeah, I think it's just comfort. It's something that I've played for a long time. Like there is Remo's a big fan of Orc as well, even though he's an Undead player, and he's sort of always explained Orc as like the super precise race, like the extremely difficult race. And like obviously I'm not very good at all, so it's like, I haven't gotten to the point where it's very precise. I'm very, build headhunters and run at your base. But for the top Orc players, compared to the other top players of the other races, Orc is very, very precise. You have to do very specific, to the second creep route to counter your opponent, because Orc is very reactionary, compared to the other races that are very proactive. You have to scout if they're going for a Cripplord expansion. You have to scout if the human's going for fast expansion, and you have to be the one to counter it, because you can't counter expand, because that's just how Orc works. So it's very often, with especially how the meta is right now, Orc is always reacting, and they need a very precise, immediate reaction, and they also need to be able to scout for that. So Orc, the reason why I think people like it and gravitate towards it is because it's very, very precise, and it's very like, you watch Lyn and you're like, oh my god, if I could only be like 5% as good as that, then it's like, it looks really cool. I think that's the reason why people like Orc as a race. But for me, it's always just been comfort. It's always been like, when I go to Night Elf for 6 months, and then I'm just thinking back to like, I was a lot better at Orc. I should just start playing Orc again. It's always just been comfort and sort of home base, like you say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun thing that you mentioned, because I always feel like when I play off race and do random things on ladder, then I queue up as Orc, and then I try to play Blade Master, and oftentimes it goes that it's just a completely different game, like compared to Farseer Headhunters, which is more comparable to like DK Fiends or Rival Casters, Human, or anything else. It feels very unnatural for me to play Blade Master because I'm not used to it. I feel a bit about the same as when I play like fast expansion style with Human. I'm much more comfortable just sitting on one base and getting used to that. So when I try to play any of those strategies, I think another one is like Ghoul opening as Undead. That's also one of those that feels very foreign to me.
Yes.
I do think that raises the question in the game that you can have something that's very unnatural. Some would say it's difficult to pull off. It might not be unbalanced. It might be totally fine. Might be the best, as oftentimes Blade Master or Fast Expansion is. I do think that raises the interesting question about how do you balance a game with difficulty in mind, and how do you make a strategy like Blade Master or Fast Expand that's so unique, and that's part of the charm. How do you make that accessible
Right.
to everyone?
Yeah, because the difficulty of in a balance setting when it comes to difficulty is like if a race or if a build order is extremely strong, but it just takes the execution, then you're on to the question, which this balance discussions always end up melting down to like this bedrock of a point. Like, do you balance around pros or do you balance around like the median player, like
Exactly.
the middle of the road player, like someone like my skill level? Do you balance around them? The players that have very strong opinions about balance and think they know what they're talking about, but they have no chance against even the top 5% of people. So if something's very, very difficult and very strong, then it probably is too strong, because a lot of the times what people end up saying is, of course, you're going to bounce around pro. You're going to bounce around Moon, Lin, Happy, Infi, whoever your favorite of all the 4 races are. You're going to bounce around these guys, just because that's sort of what you have to do. I don't know if I have a clear, thought out answer that I could give for why that is, but it just feels like that's what you should do. It feels wrong to balance for the casual person. So to answer your question, if there's a strategy that's very strong but very, very difficult to execute, I think that almost will be nerfed if you follow this philosophy, because Lin is always going to have no problem executing something very difficult, and he's going to be able to abuse the fact that it's very strong. But we're in a state in the meta where, unfortunately, the difficult to execute strategies are not the strongest strategies if executed well. We're in the meta where, Farseer Headhunters is the strongest strategy and happens to be probably the easiest strategy in the game. Something like, fast expansions, even though ghouls, but like Criplord Fast Expo is like one of the strongest strategies, and maybe not now, but Keeper Mass Huntress, Keeper Mass Archers. For human, unfortunately, Pally Rifles is not the strongest strategy, or else I could say the same thing about human. But human has all. Maybe that is why human is in such a weak state, because they don't have an easy strategy that is also very strong. They only have very difficult strategies that are very strong. The fast expansion, like you mentioned, or one base rifle caster, where if you lose one unit, the game is over. So we're in a weird state. But I think, to answer your question again, just to finish us off, if there's a strategy that is very difficult to execute but also very strong, that strategy probably is imbalanced, because we're bouncing for the top players.
Yeah. And when it comes to balance, there has been some pondering in the community if we should take matters in our own hands now that we have Warcraft III champions, and can do like balances on maps.
Right.
If we don't think about how that would come to be if it was a thing, what are your general thoughts on that? Do you think it should be something that we take action against if we do say as a community that Farsi Headhunters is too strong, or whatever it may be, that's the top of the leaderboards? Should it be something that we interfere with, or should we just accept it until maybe Blizzard comes with a solution or does not?
Yeah, my thoughts on this is absolutely, unequivocally, no, never, ever, 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 please God, let us do balance on custom maps. Please, never, ever. There's 2 sides to this. One side is one side's very selfish from me, and one side is very rude from me. So no matter what, I don't end up ahead here. But the selfish side is, from me personally, I have this weird thing when I play games, and I've talked to Neo about this. We did the Backlog podcast. We did a few of those. I've talked to him about this. There's this when it comes to playing video games, competitive video games, I find it weird to play a competitive game when like we almost make the rules. Like I never wanted to play like any mods for things like that. Like if I did like, say, like when I used to play RuneScape and I was really into doing PvP because that was the most competitive thing to do in RuneScape, I always wanted to do it in the normal game, even though you could go and you could play on private servers where you get all the best items and there's no risk of losing, stuff that you work towards in the game. I always wanted to do it on the actual client, because we don't make the rules there. We're not, changing it for our benefit. I almost need to put it into clear words, I need an authority above me saying, these are the rules. This is how you're going to play. Here's your maps. Figure it out. You know, you're supposed to be the competitor here. We're the people that decide which rules you play under. I need that as somebody that enjoys competitive games to enjoy it myself personally. I can't enjoy a game competitively if I know there's, you know, somebody in a Discord that I'm friends with that is setting the rules and regulations. Even if the rules and regulations are great that they're changing, I just don't enjoy that. And for the same reason, I don't like playing private servers on games. I don't like playing mod packs on games. Diablo 2 has great mod packs. I still like only playing vanilla Diablo 2, Diablo 1, all these games. I need there to be an authority and rules. So that's the selfish side of why I don't think this is good.
Let's hear the rude
And
one as well then.
yeah, the rude side is I don't think anyone knows what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to balance. I think it's very complicated. I've had the pleasure of being able to talk to Monk about this at Frost Giant, who's also a huge Warcraft fan, and he's very involved in the community. He's a super smart guy. He's done a lot of balance stuff. I've talked to him about that, and it's like I don't like, even the people that are considered like the analytical minds of the scene, even the top pro players, they have not a single clue what goes into behind the scenes teams balancing games. They don't know how Valve balances Dota 2. They have no idea. All they see is the numbers at the end of the day. They don't know how they arrive at those conclusions. There's probably very complicated processes other than just this, you know, has a higher win rate on ladders. There's so many factors, and, you know, you balance one matchup and it ruins the other matchups. There's so many cascading effects. I just don't think, unless it's like Monk and a team of other people like Monk doing it in the Warcraft scene for free, I just don't think we have the expertise because we're too emotionally invested in it. We're not being over analytical. We're being, you know, oh, even though I'm an undead player, you know, I think Criplord's too strong, but also as an undead player, we need to nerf Blade Master, whatever it is. You know, it's like people say like, oh, you know, I'm going to be impartial. But still, there's so much emotional attachment. So yeah, the rude side is I don't think the fuck we know what we're doing. What's that? Sorry?
It gets very political as well. Like,
yes,
playing to your own, you know, preferences. Be it if you play or just enjoy seeing a specific style.
Yeah, and we almost need to go back to the authority above the competitive game. That's also nice because then the scapegoat is some unknown entity. It's just, I hate you, Blizzard. It's not, you know, I hate you, Floss 2 times daily for implementing the rifle change that's now imbalanced. You know, like there's none of that. Like it would get very toxic very fast. I guarantee it.
Very easy to
especially
witch hunt when you know who is in the secret committee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you know who the witch is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And there, I mean, people will always be unhappy with how the state of things are. I know when we played on Warcraft III Arena, people hated the meta and people hated talents and people hated, you know, tanks and whatever the thing to hate was. And the same thing with all the patches we've had, you know, from 1.28 and forward, there's always been something that you could just like circle joke and hate on.
Yes.
And it would be the same if we took matters in our own hands and made a poll of gathered the smartest people in the scene. There'll always be something to hate upon.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Although I do think we are in a state that needs to be changed. I'm definitely of the opinion that we need to change. That needs to be balanced. There needs to be changes to a lot of things, probably. But I just, you know, I'm of the opinion that I don't think we're cut out to do it ourselves, unfortunately.
If you could choose, what would you rather have? Would you rather have that Blizzard made some changes that objectively improved balance and then left it as that, or would you rather that they once a year or once every 2 years switch things up and changed something?
Right, and then risk screwing it up again, I guess, is the other side of that coin.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think for the health of the game, it's good to change every year. I think that would make it more exciting and maybe potentially bring in more people. I suppose would be the good side of that. Whereas the bad side of that is like that. Then the bad side of that is then the balance is sort of over forever, and we can never change if we do end up finding a flaw in the balance. That was the only patch. It's done. But I think it would be better for the game overall, even if we risk screwing up the balance like we did with the Keeper patch and the Crippler patch and the Farseer Headhunters patch, with there being like a yearly thing for sure from Blizzard. And at least that, it's just, at least it gets sort of people talking about the game, I think. Even though maybe the balance is rough, at least we get a post on the Blizzard forum. We get some Reddit forums going. People are talking about it on Twitter. People are like, "Ooh, balance patch! I'll come back out of retirement to try this out." I think it would be better for the game. Better for the balance would probably if they tried to fix it once and then never touched it again.
Yeah. I also think it keeps things alive, even though something is busted. Let's say Keeper hunts against Orc. Let's take that as an example. I do think most will agree that that was a very oppressive era, and some will argue it still is. But I do think it's still interesting to see how the game evolves, even though there's no changes on the balance.
Yeah.
Like you saw, if I remember correctly, people in the beginning still played like Radar Walker with the Blade and Shadowhunter. And then there was like transition to, in the end at least, I don't know all the steps of the way, but like the Grunt Shaman that we know, and adding in a quicker bestiary or later bestiary. And there's been a lot of iterations on, that's just one example, but on all the matchups there's been. That's one of the things I really enjoy watching when I see competitive people play. All these nuances that comes along the way.
Yeah, I think it has been. This could be like recency bias, or it could be me just not knowing, because just for reference, when I started playing ladder a week after patch 1.26, which was the last patch before 1.27, which I think was like when they fixed the BattleNet servers and stuff, but that only happened when they announced Reforged. So like the 8-9 years I actually initially started playing, there was no patches. But it does feel like since the Keeper patch and stuff, feels like people have been very, very innovative with how they change things, and very, very creative. Like there's been so much change. You mentioned like starting on Raider Walker. People never used shamans back in the day. Like shamans were not a unit you played. They were played probably less than like necromancers. I can't think of a single usage for shamans other than like trolling with bloodlust, like before, obviously way back in the day they were used, but from the time that I played, I'm thinking of, it was only Raider Walker. So the fact that we have that, like there's so much different variants now. They definitely achieved what they wanted to. Keeper was always a meme strat. It was only used for like Aura and Bear Mirrors, or sometimes it was like Demon Hunter, Keeper, Mass Dryads all in was a strategy, but Keeper was barely ever played. Priest of the Moon was played more than that. Criplord was a complete joke. I think the only time I saw Criplord played was like Ted doing a 2 barracks ghoul rush on Lost Temple in like 2004, or like Philbot. Shout out Philbot, who would just go mass fiends with a Criplord. It was a meme strat. It was like the strategy that hackers played on BattleNet was Criplord first. Dreadlord was never played either. That was a strat that was played in like 4v4. Tavern Heroes, Alchemist. Think back to like the usage of Alchemist. Melting Valley, Orc versus Human, Mass Griffins to get rid of the armor so your bats could hit more. That was it. That was what Alchemist was used for. That is literally the only thing. I think that was the only thing. So like there has been great changes. There's been great changes to make everything more or less viable, which I think is excellent, because then it allows people to be way more creative. I would argue more creative than at least I've ever seen them be in Warcraft. So I think it was good, but there's been some ridiculously horribly imbalanced stuff. Notably, as you mentioned, Orc versus Night Elf it still is a joke, from my biased opinion.
Yeah, and I think that goes a bit back to the difficulty contra balance. I don't necessarily think it's the insanely imbalanced. I think Night Elf is stronger, but I think a lot of it comes down to the frustration of they can do so many things. They have so many points to attack you, hidden AP, early expansion, or you have to be able to be so ready to react. And I think reacting to something is very difficult in a game like Warcraft. I think it's general for like RTSs, but when you can
Mhm.
sort of like put the opponent on the back feet by pressuring on one base with headhunters and Farseer, then you limit them so much that their options are very few, and you know what you have to react to.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you sort of tied it all together there, definitely. And yeah, for Night Elf, it's like it makes what is difficult about Orc necessary in order to win, which is the perfect reaction, perfect information, knowing the right and immediate counter to it. Yeah, so that's what is beautiful about Orc when it's done perfectly, but also very difficult about Orc. And then Night Elf is just every other race, it's very, very easy to react because you're so aggressive on them. Whereas Night Elf, by definition of how the matchup works with Keeper and Tangle, you almost can't be aggressive with anything more than a Blade Master. You have to be extremely defensive. But you also have to be able to scout everything and react to everything, so it makes it extremely difficult.
Yeah, because if you take one of the strategies and you knew what they were doing, if you knew that they could only take down the expansion at this place or at this point in the game, then you wouldn't have to do all the scouting, and you would prepare your strategies specifically for that.
Yeah, and then Orc would probably destroy Night Elf. Maybe I would have to ask Hitman because he might yell at me for saying that, but as he often does. But I think for argument's sake, you could say yes. Then Orc would be very favored in the matchup. I think if there was one strategy, but maybe then they just go back to playing Talon, so that who knows.
And then we're back to square one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Carson, when I play Warcraft 3, I have started playing again these recent months. I have discovered that I'm the type of person who will play 50 games and not put one thought into any of my losses or any of my wins.
Right.
I know you're a very analytical player. I watched some of your Theorycraft videos that you sort of made while I was on a hiatus, so I came back to the scene and just saw 30-something videos going in depth with different things. Very helpful for someone like me.
Good, I'm glad.
What would you say that you use that a lot when you play yourself, or does that come from watching pro players? Like when you play yourself the game, do you put a lot of thought into your losses and your wins and reviewing what you could have done better, or is it purely for your cast and from reviewing pro players?
Yeah, being analytical has something it maybe is like a personality trait. That's sort of always how I am with everything. Like very much overanalyzing everything, like in real life as well, and like trying to find out like the root of every problem, and figuring out like a solution and planning it out front to back. Like that's sort of how I've always worked, even if it's like doing the dishes at home or something like that. What's the most efficient way that we can do the dishes, guys? And let's plan it out. And I'm gonna chart it out. Let me get my whiteboard. That's very much how I am, just from a personality standpoint. And that's helped me improve at that in Warcraft, because I would always do that in watching Warcraft games. And it also helps that I've watched a lot of games. But when it comes to me actually playing, I would almost say it feeds into my tilt a lot of the time, because I have this assumption always, which is definitely not correct, that I already know what I did wrong when I lose. And the reason that